Welcome to Breezin with Bierman, the podcast, a Princetonian Now Media Group production. As always, our aim is to educate, entertain, inform, and tell you what's trending. And again, if you like what you hear on this podcast, please check us out on, I think we're on Apple, iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud, Facebook, soon to be YouTube. I don't think we own our shows if it's on YouTube and stuff. Today's guest is an entrepreneur who started her own startup, CoTech Corp. I'd like to meet your bank account, your accountant, and sold it. Very active in nonprofits and boards in Princeton, New Jersey, and the schools, etc. And is currently joined or asked to join the Everytown Survivor Fellowship Program, an organization that has people step forward and share their own personal stories concerning gun violence and ways we can change gun violence, hopefully for the better. We're talking to Dina Shaw. Thank you for making it, Dina.
Hi, good to be here. And it's an exciting day to be talking about this, Adam.
Why is that?
So in the previous Congress, a piece of legislation, HR 8, was put before the House of Representatives, and it passed, and it was going to make mandatory background checks for all gun owners. And it sat for 2+ years on Senator Mitch McConnell's desk, and he would not put it before the Senate. But today it was put forward again, and it's
amazing. Why do you think it happened? Why did Mitch McConnell, because I mean, there's a lot of politics, the NRA, people running for re-election, afraid not getting elected. What happened?
Well, you know, I mean, in the last Congress, I think personally, these are just my thoughts. These aren't even from Everytown, but you know, the Senate was controlled by the NRA, but now the NRA is bankrupt. It's a perfect trifecta. The NRA is bankrupt. We have a president and a vice president who have long history and records of being in support of sensible gun legislation. And now we have the House and we have the Senate. So, you know, depending on how the bills are written, and in this case, this is a bill that has a 93% approval rating. I think the numbers are like 88% of Republicans and 87% of Democrats, and somehow it comes up to this big, huge number. It's kind of a no-brainer. We need to control who gets hold of guns. We have a pandemic going on in the world, and we have another crisis in the United States. It's a health crisis, and it has to do with the number of guns that are just running around our streets. And there are so many issues associated with this. But today is a great day, March 2nd, 2021, because they put it before the House, and I posted something on Facebook that people can click from all over the country. It will take you into the system to send a message to your legislators that we want them to all co-sponsor this bill, so that there's a resounding amount of support in favor of this particular piece of legislation.
Just quickly for our listeners, is that Dina Shaw's Facebook page or the Everytown Fellowship Facebook?
So it's on my Facebook page, my
Dina
personal
Shaw
page, but if you go to Everytown, everytown.com, is it everytown.com? Whatever, just Google Everytown and it will pop up, and it talks all about this issue, this piece of legislation. And it is, you know, there are a lot of hot buttons around the concept of guns, and this organization has no interest in taking anybody's Second Amendment rights away. We just want to make sure that we can all live in a safer country.
Mm-hmm. This leads me to your own personal story. And would you think this legislation maybe would not have stopped, or maybe would have helped stop what happened to you? But first, tell the audience how this came out, how you joined Everytown in your childhood, what happened.
Sure. And I'm going to fair warn you, I just started doing this 3 weeks ago. And so I do get a little emotional when I'm talking about it, because it's very sad. But I've been involved with moms for a couple of years. And one of the boxes that they have you check is, are you a survivor? And a survivor can take many forms. You can have a direct experience like I did. It could be a third party, because every time there is a death due to gun violence, the ripple effects are profound. And the studies have shown it can touch upwards of 100 people. Because, for instance, in my family, we're 30 or 40 immediate, and then all of the people that I've met who hear my story get affected. my story is one that involves domestic violence as well. I grew up in Cape Elizabeth, Maine, and I was raised in a home in the 60s and 70s that probably had too much drinking and other things going on. And when I was 10 years old, my father came home, probably most likely having drunk too much, and took out his gun to clean it. And instead he pointed it at my mother, and he fired it, and she died that night. And I was a light sleeper, so I was the witness to it. I mean, I didn't hear that. I
Did
heard
you
my
come
dad.
downstairs to see this?
So I heard them fighting, because that's what kids do, and or I did. And fortunately, I'm one of four, and my other siblings slept through this part. And then I heard my mother cry, and I thought it was we had this big vase in our house, and I thought the vase had fallen on her foot. I mean, I was 10. And when I ran downstairs, she was lying in the kitchen on the floor, gasping because the bullet had gone through her. And what I had heard was it had gone out the window. So what I
Jesus.
heard was a piece of glass breaking, which I thought was this vase, but it wasn't. And
So other people could have got hit too. I mean, there's.
you know, what did he do next? Then right in front of me, he turned the gun on himself and shot himself.
Oh
But
gosh.
you know, this is not an uncommon story. It's a terrible story. And you know, the four of us ended up getting adopted by second cousins, which is a whole nother tale of moving in with aunts and uncles who couldn't take us, and they were going to send us back to the state of Maine. And I was 10. We were 3, 9, 10, and 14. And I don't know what would have happened to the 3 older ones, and I may not even know my sister if we weren't this fortunate. But you know, this situation happens because people who shouldn't have guns, and I don't think that my father should have had a gun from some of the mental issues that he suffered from, obviously. And my mother was a woman well ahead of her time. She had 2 master's degrees by the early 70s. She was going to change the world. She was trying to change the world. And you know, marriage is complicated, and you throw a gun into it, and the stresses of having children, and some terrible things happen. And when I lived with this for a long time, obviously.
How do you process this? How do you, I mean, I can't fathom what one goes. I mean, you keep living, obviously, but what happens to your brain, to your psyche?
Well, I mean, I suffer from PTSD. I could tell you that right now. And I suffer from the ramifications of having been raised in a volatile household. You know, it affected me all throughout my life, and probably ways I didn't even know. You know, my sister and I have a joke about PO, which is pre-Oprah. So, you know, before Oprah, I don't know what we did. We managed it as best as we could. When my daughter turned 10, I tell the story that, like, you know, it was super traumatic for me, which was 9 years ago, because I looked at her and I thought, what would you do without me? Like, what would you do if I wasn't here anymore suddenly? And, you know, then I digested that some more. But, you know, as you mentioned, I was building a business and doing all those things. And, you know, about 3 or 4 months ago, I started to get my nerve up to tell my story. And it's not easy because I love Princeton. I live in Princeton. I'm a big part of this community in different ways. But I didn't know if I wanted that label, you know, like, you know, oh, Dina, look what she survived. Because I had survived a lot of things, and I had done a lot of positive things.
You don't want this to define totally who you are, right?
But then I was reached out to by Everytown, and they said they have this amazing program, a fellowship program. I had to apply. It was a little bit like applying to college. And they interviewed me, and then they came back and they said, you know, what we really need are spokespeople that we can have do things like this interview. I spoke at something a week ago. I'm going to speak at a couple other things. And so that people can see that gun violence affects all different shapes and sizes. And that's what made me want to do this, is that it's time now for all of the people that are listening to this to act, to get involved, and everybody can act and get involved in different ways. And we can put in place sensible gun legislation so that perhaps other people don't have to suffer the way I did, and my family
Do you
did.
think statistically, though, this gun legislation will help? It will stop what happened to you statistically to more families today?
I think that if background checks were in place and my father was in the state that he was in, there are other things. There's red flag laws that are being looked at, which are the ability that somebody could make a phone call, an anonymous phone call, and protect a family. So, if you know that somebody in your neighborhood has guns and they have become unstable, you're able to call in certain communities. And I don't know exactly all the far reaching points of it because we're working on that as well. But there's that one. There's another amazing law called Ethan's Law because of a terrible tragedy that happened in Connecticut that will make liable or responsible gun owners that have children under 18 in their home because of a child that unfortunately had played with a gun at a friend's house and died. So
Everytown's helping you tell your story. Also, you want to influence legislation, you want to raise awareness, educate, all those type things.
yes, absolutely. And I will just throw this out there now that there is something that people can do that are listening, which is to text the word honor, HONOR, to 64433. And I can repeat that at the end, but that is a way that you can then join this effort, and it will ask you, it'll prompt you some questions. There are chapters in every state in the United States. There are 6 million members of Everytown, and I am a member of Moms Demand Action. That's my shirt. And that is a section of Everytown. And Moms Demand Action was formed after Sandy Hook, that terrible, terrible tragedy in Connecticut. And people who are affecting, I learned this weekend, so I was invited to do this, and then I was onboarded this weekend as part of it. And it's a 2-year process. So over the next 2 years, I will be educated. I will be taught about public speaking and what the message should be and how to get the message out, and how important this is for our country. But we need these kinds of safety measures to be in place to protect all of us. And but if you do that text honor to 64433, you'll get prompted to join a chapter. And within those chapters, lots of volunteer opportunities, everything from community outreach to Wear Orange Day in June, to being a facilitator to reach out to others to educate them.
And for those who don't know, this organization, it's backed by Bloomberg. They're not going anyplace.
No, it's incredibly well funded, and we have 350,000 donors annually. So he started it, but it's very, very, very well funded, and it's one of these things that I think, this has affected people. Our children know how to dive under desks. People are afraid to go to concerts. You get concerned when you walk into a house of worship. These are terrible, terrible things that are uniquely American. And
we have so many guns out there in this country. We have millions.
The statistics are 400 million guns. We only have
so more guns than people. Wow. Right.
Well, and we won't get into, I'm not fluent in all of the ins and outs yet. I'm still being educated. But today, this piece of legislation, call your legislator. Even if you're watching this in a month, today is March 2nd, it's not going to go anywhere. And every member of Congress needs to know that background checks are a must and a very important first step.
Yeah, we have them for driver's license. Now we're going to go to voices from the crowd. I'm not saying you can answer all these questions, but I ask people randomly, mostly in Princeton, to ask you questions. I just said, your background, why you're here and everything. This is from Peter. Are you chasing something? Are you running away from something? Is this your therapy? Maybe you've answered that. Joining this organization and talking about this.
I'm not chasing anything. I'm not running away from anything. If anything, I'm running towards something, which is change. And what Everytown says is that storytelling is one of the most impactful ways for people to embrace an important subject.
It's ingrained in our DNA. We are you're Homo sapiens as storytellers, yes.
Absolutely. And, by inspiring people to understand that, what we want is safety. We want, I don't want anyone else to experience this. And in my interactions with other survivors, it's incredible to hear their stories and what they've been through. And in some cases, it's a survivor's mother was at Sandy Hook, but that was the ripple. And why now is because of the rest of my life, which I have 3 teenagers. I was building a business. I was volunteering. And it does, it is a drain. I have a very good natural ability to compartmentalize things. That's just God gave that to me. But I think about these. I thought about this interview every minute for the past since you and I booked it 3 weeks ago. But I feel this is a very important topic for everybody, even in a town like Princeton.
Second question, this is from a psychiatrist, didn't want his name used. What your parents did, one could say, would be the ultimate betrayal, because parents are supposed to be this solid objects. Did you have hate, or how has this affected your own idea about parenting your kids?
I never hated them. I was 10. You don't hate at 10 yet. You gotta wait till you're
But later on, when you look back,
So
did you feel robbed of something?
I felt robbed from having been able to know my mother. We were incredibly close. And during times in my life, like I can remember at 28, I was living back in Connecticut, and somebody happened to talk to me about her and tell me how she and I were super, super close. And, then that welled up all this emotion in me. And as far as my own children, I'll be honest, Adam, I'm very careful about how much I drink. I would never have a gun in my house. I'm super cognizant of the effects that parents have on their children. I'm not perfect. I'm not perfect. My children would tell you that by any stretch of the imagination. But as far as some of these bigger global issues, I did not continue the cycle of insanity. And I will say this about my parents. It was a long time ago, and my father, James Lewison, was a
professor, right? He was a highly PhD professor, the whole bit.
Yeah, he was a bit of a tortured soul. His father, Ludwig Lewison, had been somewhat of a larger than life fellow, and there had been a lot of conflict between James and Ludwig, and lots of conflict. And James was just could not find himself, and my mother was this huge force trying to do her thing, and they had 4 kids, so lots of stresses. I don't think that James had the success that he wanted, and they were young. They were only 36 and 39. They were about my mother was 39 when she died, so
she's been dead longer than she was alive. Wow.
Yeah, no, she died in 1974. Mm-hmm.
Well, to end this, though, this has been, it's been rather illuminating and also emotional. I appreciate what you've done. Where do you want to be with the fellowship, say 2 to 3 years? I think you're a talented person. I've said this. I think you do have leadership qualities. You're articulate, and Lord knows you're one who likes to finish things. You like to get things done. Where do you want to be in 2 or 3 years, hopefully, with this organization? And then say anything, repeat any websites and texts that you need to.
There are ways to go on to being a senior fellow. I can work higher up in the organization, I guess. I don't really know. I mean, for me, if 2 years from now we have pieces of legislation passed like HR 8, Ethan's Law, we can start making some steps toward just sensible gun legislation. I will consider that my efforts in telling my story and being a volunteer to have been successfm not, this is not about me, Dina. This is about something much, much, much bigger. And I'm really happy to be part of it. And there's amazing, amazing volunteers out there and people trying to do things.
Right. Well, anyway, I still think I could see you maybe, in 2 years from now being on CNN or something, or Fox News, or people attacking you or people with you. But I think you're right. I think we're seeing finally the tides. I mean, I think most of America was for this. It was just this political stalemate and a small minority of people on both sides who kind of elevated it to a political roadblock, so to speak.
Yeah. I mean, I just want to say the last couple things. First of all,
Sure.
On my personal mantra is life is not a spectator sport. You have to get involved. And I've always done that. You mentioned my local volunteer work, broader volunteer work. And, this is an issue that is should be apolitical. And so I hope people who watch this text honor, HONOR, to 64433. Call your legislators, get involved. It would be really amazing if there was an uprising, not uprising, but a groundswell from something like this podcast. And I really appreciate you having me on, Adam.
No, I appreciate you coming and sharing this. And I know it's not that easy, as I can tell. Well, this has been Breezin with Bierman, the podcast under the Princetonian Now Media Group. We're talking to Dina Shaw of the, I just go to the other page, I'm sorry, of the Everytown Survivor Fellowship Program. And this has been, I hope everyone watches this video. Thank you very much, Dina.
Thank you.